Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome His Excellency Martin Frick, Senior Director of Policy and Program Coordination from United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. 有请联合国气候变化框架公约政策与项目协调高级官员 Martin Frick 阁下。
A very good morning to you. Thank you. A very good morning and welcome to an exciting session about the role bamboo and rattan can play in fighting climate change and in providing the basis for sustainable development. My name is Martin Frick. I'm a Senior Director with the United Nations Framework Convention to fight climate change. We will have two elements of this morning. First, we are going to hear a video address by my boss, Patricia Espinosa, the Executive Secretary of the UN Framework Convention to fight climate change. Then we will have a keynote speech by Her Excellency Jovrine Kaliisa Kyomukama. And then we will have a TED-style talk by Pablo from the Lugt. After that, I'm happy to announce a distinguished panel with 6 outstanding panelists, which I will introduce after that. And already at this point, ladies and gentlemen, be informed that you will have the opportunity to ask questions. So if there's anything you want to know or anything you want to add to our discussion, there will be roaming microphones available for you. So, ladies and gentlemen, 2015 was an exciting year for the international community. After many years of negotiations, the Paris Agreement finally has provided the legally binding instrument to fight climate change. But at the same time, leaders of this world have agreed on the Sustainable Development Goals, and these are yet the most ambitious goals that mankind has ever set for themselves. Let me just focus on SDG 1, eradicating poverty, and 2, eradicating hunger. It doesn't say reducing the number of poor people. It doesn't say reducing the number of hungry people. It actually speaks about eradicating hunger and poverty. And all of that while the impact of climate change is all about us. And I don't need to tell you, you're coming from so many countries of this planet, you see the impact of climate change every single day. So we need all hands on deck. We need every possibility that we have to go for this double challenge. And I'm happy to give the floor with a video message to Patricia Espinosa, the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Can we have the video message, please?
Thank you for the opportunity to address the Global Bamboo and Rattan Congress. Climate change is a defining challenge of our times, and we are seeing its impacts, especially upon vulnerable communities like never before. From storms to droughts to heat waves, climate change is affecting lives, livelihoods, and the economic prosperity of people throughout the world. In 2015, governments adopted the Paris Agreement to address climate change. The goal of the agreement is to limit global temperature rise this century to well below 2 degrees Celsius, ideally 1.5 degrees Celsius. But to achieve this, we must achieve zero net emissions by mid-century. This will not be easy, but it is possible if we take urgent and ambitious action now. The Paris Agreement is a party-driven process, but it recognizes that governments alone cannot solve climate change on their own. They can only succeed if everyone gets involved, including businesses, local governments, and citizens, including all of you. Not long ago, I had the opportunity to meet Madame Xiang Zehui, co-chair of the Board of Trustees of INBAR. I was pleased to discuss with her how your sector continues to take significant climate action. Further to that, I'm pleased to note that all 43 members of INBAR are signatories to the Paris Agreement. Bamboo and rattan can make an important difference in the fight against climate change. You will hear from other speakers about bamboo and rattan's potential to store carbon at fast rates. You'll hear about its durable products, which lock in carbon, and its ability to rebuild and restore degraded soils. You'll also hear how, across the world, rural communities are using bamboo and rattan for their livelihoods as a source of robust, disaster-resilient housing, as a fast-growing and locally accessible form of fuel, and as a valuable carbon sink. In short, bamboo and rattan represent an important part of reducing net emissions. This is exactly what the world needs right now. Ladies and gentlemen, climate action goes hand in hand with sustainable development. It also depends on and creates green jobs. Your industry provides incomes for tens of millions of people across the tropical and subtropical South. This is a win-win approach to climate action. I applaud your commitment to aligning your sector even more fully with the goals of the Paris Agreement. Recognizing the extraordinary challenge that we face, I encourage you to work with your governments, your members, and your partners to raise your ambition even further. I wish you a successful conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And how this translates in a country, to be precise, in Uganda, is the topic of the keynote speech we are going to hear now from Her Excellency, Jovrine Kaliisa Kyomukama. Excellency, you have the floor. Please, the microphone is yours.
Your Excellencies, all protocol observed, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to speak to you today at the second plenary session of the Global Bamboo and Rattan Congress. As a member of Parliament of Uganda, a country which is full of very vulnerable to the effects of climate change, as well as a member of Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Climate Change, I'm very passionate about issues of our changing climate. It gives me great pleasure to see so many people gathered here who are also interested in using our natural resources to combat climate change and build a more resilient world. Uganda is a country which is very vulnerable to climate change impacts. The economy and well-being of our people are tightly bound to climate. In particular, climate change is likely to mean increased food insecurity, greater soil erosion and land degradation, flood damage to infrastructure and settlements, and changing productivity of agriculture and natural resources. It will be the poor and vulnerable who feel these impacts the hardest. However, our economy also stands to be affected with the shift of certain crop growing areas, which are key to our economic growth. As many of you will know, these problems are shared with a lot of countries across Africa. Flooding, drought, food and water insecurity, diseases, the destruction of homes and infrastructure, and ecosystem destruction are some of the many challenges African countries face in a changing climate. Ladies and gentlemen, IMBA has 18 member states across Africa, and I'm delighted to hear that we will soon be welcoming one more member, the Central African Republic. We've already heard from Her Excellency, Ms. Patricia, how important bamboo can be as a tool to help mitigate and adapt climate change. In addition, I'd like to share that bamboo is already one of the important indigenous plant resources in Uganda. A large number of communities depend on bamboo for day-to-day use, including as housing, food, agriculture and household utility products, and support structures for crops. According to a recent report released by IMBA, there is a clear potential for Uganda's bamboo sector to thrive and provide more support to our country. Uganda has already worked with IMBA on a number of projects that will help our country use bamboo to become more climate resilient. Uganda is one of the several countries involved in the Dutch-Sino-East Africa project led by IMBA, and I was delighted to hear yesterday that the Dutch government is considering an extension to this important initiative. So far, the Dutch-Sino-East Africa project has helped Uganda to find out how many bamboo resources we have, where they grow, and to identify the key bamboo product value chains which would benefit from increased support. With further work, more Ugandans can benefit from bamboo as an important source of income, particularly those communities whose livelihoods are impacted by a changing climate. We're also keen to new skills from other IMBA member states which can help us build a more climate resilient Uganda. These include using bamboo for land restoration, for renewable charcoal and gas, and as a source of disaster-resilient housing. All these are critical uses for bamboo which can have an important impact on African countries. Climate change, preparedness. I'm very happy to hear news about a new China-Africa training center, which I understand will be established shortly. With more training and capacity building, we can teach more people to use bamboo for climate adaptation. Ladies and gentlemen, in Uganda, we take climate change very seriously. I'm a member of Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Climate Change, a forum which was created in 2008 by members of the 8th Parliament of Uganda to respond to the pressing environmental, social, and economical issues presented by the climate change. The forum's vision is to help create a prosperous and climate change resilient Uganda. I firmly believe that bamboo can play a role in this vision. On behalf of the government of Uganda, we remain willing to support IMBA in its work to promote bamboo and rattan for sustainable development. We are very pleased to be part of such an important network that connects, shares, and builds on experience of bamboo growers and users across the world to create livelihoods, protect the environment, and combat climate change. I wish you all the best for this Congress and for future work together. It is time to think about bamboo for God and my country.
Thank you, Excellency. And I think the very existence of the parliamentary group in Uganda is an example to follow about how climate change really needs an all-of-government and all-of-society approach to really find holistic solutions to maybe one of the biggest problems mankind has ever faced. Ladies and gentlemen, you have already met our next speaker if you have seen this book that was distributed, because he's the author of it. Pablo van der Lugt is going to give us a TED-style talk about the benefits of rattan and bamboo, and without much ado, Pablo, you have the floor. Please give a hand of applause to our speaker.
I'm concerned about the disturbing messages about climate change and the increasing stories about droughts, hurricanes, floodings, not only in tropical areas, but also in Europe and North America. Houston, we have a new problem. This is caused by growing global population and related growth of extraction of raw materials and fossil fuels, leading to ever-increasing emissions of greenhouse gases. One of the main contributors to the greenhouse gas effect is the building industry. But we all need to live in a house, right? We see the problem here, actually. We see concrete, we see steel, aluminium, glass, plastics. All non-renewable materials. At some point, these will be depleted. The ore mines will be empty. Also, we keep deforesting our tropical rainforests. If we continue like this, in 500 years, all our tropical rainforests will be gone. So you might say, I don't live up to 500 years. But your generation, or the generation of your children, will see the end of ore-based metals, or of oil-based plastic. But then we hear the circular economy, we can recycle. No problem. Don't put all your money on recycling. Even in Europe, known so well for good recycling policies, all plastic, all PVC used in the building industry, only 10% is recycled. The rest is either burnt or dumped. This is not a happy introduction, is it? But we're human beings. We can imagine, we can dream. Close your eyes, dream with me about this one building material which captures huge amounts of CO2 during growth, which goes faster than any other plant, which is harder than hardwood. We know the answer. It's bamboo. Giant bamboo can grow up to 20 to 30 meters in a couple of months. Did you know that bamboo holds the Guinness World Record for fastest growing plants, with 1 meter and 22 centimeters recorded a day? It will take about 5 years until the giant bamboo is ready for harvesting. This means that annually you can harvest the mature bamboo stems at 4 or 5 years old. That means by default no deforestation, because you have annual harvests. This 4 years is really impressive if we compare it to other renewable materials, such as pine. A pine tree has a rotation cycle of up to 30 years. Hardwood trees, such as oak, may take up to 80 years to come to maturity. And let's not even mention the non-renewable materials we still so often use. You cannot harvest them, you can only deplete them. So I think I got your attention. We see the potential of bamboo, but then why isn't bamboo mass adopted yet compared to all these other materials? This is also because bamboo in the countries where it grows is so abundantly available and therefore so inexpensive that a lot of poor people live in it, making poor constructions out of bamboo, non-durable, meaning it is perceived as the poor man's timber. This is a big pity, because if a good architect or designer works with bamboo, bamboo housing can be very earthquake resistant, can be very durable. These in-bar houses will last over decades. And tell me, does this look like poor man's timber to you? These luxurious villas in the green village in Bali, designed by Ibuku? This is rich man's timber, making magnificent use of the lightness, strength and beauty of this natural resource to create these kind of fairy tale-like houses. I bet you wouldn't mind living in these kind of houses, right? But then you might say, well, I live in a city, in a temperate climate, I want to keep the rain and wind out, this doesn't work for me. Oh, then you're wrong. There's a new solution. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the future of bamboo. Industrially processed, high-quality, engineered bamboo building materials. People often ask me, how do you get from the round, hollow stem to these kind of building materials? It's actually really easy. Think about making French fries. You have a potato, put it to a star-formed knife, and I'm sorry the video doesn't run. You get your strip, you take the inner and outer skin out, and then you have your building block. The bamboo strip is the building block to produce all kinds of high-quality building materials if you press or compress them, to produce high-quality panels, beams, flooring boards, and we can now even use bamboo outdoors to replace tropical hardwood, aluminium and PVC, for example for decking and cladding. And it doesn't come at the expense of the environment. For my PhD, I calculated the carbon footprint of engineered bamboo. Because bamboo grows so quick, it absorbs huge amounts of CO2. Thus, if we then include transport, harvesting, processing, even to the Netherlands, then we still have a negative carbon footprint of minus half a ton of CO2 per ton of material produced. A lot better than sustainably sourced hardwoods. And not even comparing, of course, to the non-renewable building materials we still so often use. And it also looks good. What do you think about these two-colored bamboo flooring, industrial flooring in this bank office in the Netherlands? 200,000 square meters of curved ceiling panels in Madrid International Airport, designed by the famous British architect Richard Rogers. High wear-resistant flooring, train stations in France, sustaining over 20 million pedestrians going over it each year. High-end, posh, super stable bamboo outdoor decking in Switzerland. Huge facades of outdoor bamboo beams in Norway. And this will be the future. Structural use of engineered and laminated bamboo. We'll start small, pergolas, carports, but when there were more engineered bamboo classification systems and building codes, we can go bigger and we can make advantage of the trend towards tall timber building. Because these kinds of tall timber buildings are popping up in Australia, in Europe, in North America. Potentially that can also be done in engineered bamboo. And then imagine that 1 ton or cubic meter of engineered bamboo, substituting concrete or steel, will have a CO2 benefit of 3 tons of CO2 per cubic meter engineered bamboo used. Because of carbon captured in the engineered bamboo and the substitution of high-emitting building materials. If we then look at the building level, this becomes really impressive. 1,700 cubic meters of engineered bamboo, instead of steel and concrete, will save more than 5,000 tons of CO2. That is as much as 800 European households emit a year. Let's zoom out even further. Let's look at it from a global level. We know about the global problem of tropical deforestation. And we know that this leads to large emissions of greenhouse gases. We also know that some bamboo species are very suitable for reforestation, even on degraded lands and eroded slopes. If we take into account the growing area of bamboo and compare it to the places where deforestation occurs, we see an interesting possibility, don't we? The World Resource Institute has mapped those degraded lands worldwide that are suitable for deforestation. It neatly overlaps the natural growing area of giant bamboo. The Chinese government has seen the potential of reforesting with bamboo. A lot of poor agricultural lands the last decades have been reforested with giant bamboo, such as Mozo bamboo. If we take into account that from degraded land to 1 hectare of reforested land with giant bamboo, 1,000 tons of CO2 will be captured in the soil, in the roots, in the stems, but also, importantly, the durable products made out of it. There's a bonus as well. You'll get a lot of high-quality building material. In ideal situations, 1 hectare of bamboo can produce 10 cubic meters of high-quality engineered building materials. Luckily, many countries in this world see the need to reforest. In the Bonn Challenge, many countries have taken up the challenge to reforest 315 million hectares of degraded land by 2030. Let's do a hypothetical scenario. We would do it with bamboo, giant bamboo, in a best case scenario. What would happen then? First of all, huge carbon capture. I told you 1 hectare of bamboo captures 1,000 tons of CO2 in a best case scenario. If we would reforest 350 million hectares with giant bamboo, this would mean that we would sequester 350 million kilotons of CO2. Wow, that sounds like a lot, doesn't it? It doesn't tell you anything yet. But if I tell you that the worldwide CO2 emissions a year are 35 million kilotons, that means by meeting the bond challenge with giant bamboo, we can compensate 10 years our global CO2 emissions, which buys us time to truly transit to a green energy economy. And I told you about the bonus. Huge amount of building materials. 1 hectare of bamboo can produce up to 10 cubic meters of engineered bamboo a year. 350 million hectares reforested would produce, to produce apartment buildings or social houses, would produce 3,500 million cubic meters a year. Not once, but every year, again and again, enough to produce 175 million social houses a year. Enough to house the continent, for example, of South America. And each year again. Sometimes people ask me, can bamboo actually save the world? And I say, it depends. It depends on governments and policymakers in the bamboo growing countries. Are they daring to adopt bamboo in reforestation strategies? Are they willing to adopt a bamboo in national energy action plans? Build up a bamboo industry based on pulp or textile, prescribing bamboo in their building projects. Only then can bamboo live up to its full potential of climate change mitigation crop. Therefore, policymakers, government officials from China and abroad, the key is in your hands. If we want to grasp the potential of bamboo, you have to adopt it or keep implementing it in your national climate change action plans. The ball is in your court. If you do so, then yes, you can contribute to help bamboo save the world a little bit. Please do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pablo van der Lugt, for your inspiring talk. I think one thing has become clear. There is one endless renewable resource on this planet, and that's human creativity. Thank you for pointing that out. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a wonderful panel, and I would like to invite my panelists to the floor, and I'm presenting them while I'm inviting them to the floor. We have from Ghana, Her Excellency Patricia Espinosa, Vice Minister for Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation. If you could please come to the floor. From ITTO, the International Tropical Timber Organization, we have Dr. Gerhard Dieterle, the Executive Director, joining us on the panel. From the United Nations from the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, Dr. Pradeep Monga, the Deputy Executive Secretary. We have from China the Deputy Director General of the International Cooperation Department of the National Forestry and Grassland Administration, Mr. Wang Chungfeng. And from India, Dr. Saibal Dasgupta, who is the Additional Director General of Forests, Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Climate Change. And last not least, my colleague from the United Nations Environmental Programme, from the World Conservation Monitoring Center, Dr. Meng Han. Very warm welcome to all of you, and please, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for our panelists. Your Excellency, let's start with Ghana. You're Vice Minister for Science, Technology, Innovation and Environment. That's quite a combination, and I think that's exactly what we are discussing here. What is your experience? What is your government's experience in fighting climate change and building resilience, but also in mitigation? Excellency, you have the floor.
Right. Thank you very much. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers of this forum. And I also want to extend our great appreciation to the Chinese government for the support that they've offered Ghana so far. My experience as a government, as a policy maker, one of the things that we have adopted to address climate change issues is by adaptation and mitigation measures. That is the INDCs that we have adopted as a country. And we know that forests play many roles in climate change mitigation through emission reduction, and then carbon sequestration, and also through carbon substitute. As a country, I think we know that our tropical forests, we have always adopted the REDD+ as a means of, as an important strategy to reduce emission. But what we also recognize as a country is to have a complementary strategy also to be adopted. And then forest restoration can help remove green gas from the atmosphere. And therefore, it is interesting to ensure that we pursue a serious forestry afforestation program. And the Ministry of Lands, Mines and Industry is currently adopting an afforestation program for which a large number of people will be involved. We're talking about 500,000 people to do an afforestation program that will, we are looking at a span of several hectares of land that will actually be replanted. So it is, in terms of adaptation, we also realize that some species cannot develop resistance to cope with the extremes of weather. So it is very critical that we adopt a different approach, and that is the use of bamboo. So what we have done through the support of the Chinese government is to ensure that we send some people out for training for the use of bamboo. But the current bamboo that we have, the natural native bamboo, it's very hard and cannot be processed into so many things, and therefore does not attract people to use it for livelihoods. So it is very important that we also develop some other species to make sure that we have addressed the use of bamboo to solve climate resilient issues. Because we know that bamboo has found to be a substitute to identify most for a carbon friendly and less expensive use in terms of climate resilience. So it is very important that we as a country to start a pilot on the use of bamboo. So what we have done is we are multiplying plantlets. We currently have bamboo spectrum where we have adopted plantlets of about 22 species, and then we are trying to apply them to the different zones of our country to ensure that its possibility of of production at certain areas of the country. So these are the initiatives that we are taking to ensure that since bamboo is a friendly product to use to control CO2 emission and also for means of livelihood and also for biomass production, it is very important and critical that we actually promote the use of bamboo for our mitigation and adaptation approach to climate resilience.
Excellent. Thank you, Your Excellency, and particularly thank you for highlighting the linkage with building resilience for local populations and highlighting the enormous task we have in front of us. Dr. Dietele, one of the things that Her Excellency just said is the pressure on tropical forests. How do you assess the situation? And given the graphic we have just seen in the introductory talk, how can we deal with the demand for tropical timber, for biomass? What role can bamboo play here?
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's a privilege and an honor for me to be here. And after the keynote presentation, I'm a bit discouraged because I seem to represent a commodity which is not very much in favor of people in the Northern Hemisphere anymore, because it has somehow a link to a sort of negative image. So the question is why I am here. And against the overwhelming positive image of bamboo and rattan, what we heard. So I agree to all of that. But let me give you a short assessment of our analysis of what happens in the tropical area and how we approach this in our organization. ITTO is an organization which has 73 member countries, and most of them are also members of INBAR. So there is a natural area of collaboration. We promote the expansion and diversification of international trade in tropical timber from sustainably managed and legally harvested forests, and to promote the sustainable management of tropical timber producing forests. So international cooperation, policy work, project activities. And I can assure you that bamboo rattan is a full part of our portfolio because we believe it belongs to the overall management of tropical forests and land resources in a holistic way. So we should look at it in context and not in establishing a divergence. Our assessment is that we have a rapidly increasing situation of deforestation, and for us the new thing in analysis which we have learned over the last year or so is that degradation is becoming a more important part than deforestation itself. We all talk about deforestation, but in the international context it doesn't play degradation doesn't play a meaningful role. And it's exactly where the area where people and forests interact. And this is why our organization is so keen to address this issue of degradation. We also see that we have in the future a sharply increased demand of forest products, including bamboo rattan, and we calculated that there is a supply gap in 2050 of about 6 billion cubic meters per year, which is an important figure to know. And from that we can argue that bamboo rattan alone cannot solve the problem. We need to work together, forest management and bamboo rattan management as one. And I think that's what I would like to say here very strongly. Let's work together and to protect the integrity of tropical forest areas. So what are the consequences if we don't address the supply gap in the future? First, people will go deeper into the forest. There will be more degradation, and it will also affect our biodiversity and protected areas. Secondly, if not addressed, we will go into more non-renewable materials, especially if you look at the rapid growth of cities, and we have heard in the keynote presentation that steel, aluminium, concrete, everything is much more damaging than naturally produced materials. This includes timber, but also bamboo and rattan especially. And the more severe effect could be that we will have a reverse trade from the north to the south. We have seen already in several countries which we analyzed that they are starting to have a supply gap already now, even forest-rich countries. And the north has a growing forest cover, and that might be a trade deficit at enormous amounts, which is not good for development, which is not good for social issues, which is not good for the stability of these countries. The good message is, and we fully agree with the keynote presentation, bamboo rattan must be a key part of the solution, because it allows for growth, for livelihood, for income, for housing. It can halt deforestation at the fringes of the centers of tropical forests like the Amazon and the Congo Basin and so on. And it is a significant contribution to climate change mitigation, but also resilience of local populations. Our calculation is, if we would close the supply gap in 2050 in tropical forests, the gain could be 8 gigatons CO2 equivalent per year. This is 25%, 20 to 25% of the global supply or the gap, a CO2 gap, which we have to fill if we want to achieve the global goals of 1.5 degrees Celsius. So we need to work together, forests and bamboo and rattan. So the other key message, which is not addressed in the UNFCCC, in the climate change regime so far, and what has come out very strongly in the keynote presentation, is that the key benefit of using green products is not so much, or not only in the forest, in the growing stock, in the field, but in the afterlife of a tree or a bamboo rattan product. It is in the buildings, it is in the products, it's in energy, and we call it substitution and storage. And we have analyzed 6 tropical countries and also came to a conclusion that the main benefit in closing the supply gap would be in substitution and in storage. So it is an enormous factor, and it should be taken to the UNFCCC. Now, the last point I would like to mention, we have now an evolution from a poor man's product in bamboo rattan to a highly sophisticated technical product, which is a different challenge. So we need, if we want to make a gain on these climate benefits, we need to make sure that the products coming from the tropical countries to the consumer countries need to be green, they need to be legal, they need to be sustainable, they need to respond to norms. And I can tell you that we had last week an important meeting here in Beijing with leading companies, timber producing companies, to which we also invite bamboo and rattan producers. They have committed themselves to establish an international green supply chain initiative, which would help producer countries to meet sustainability demands, to meet legality demands, and so on. And I hope that with the support of donor countries like China, but also the European Union and other donor countries, we can make a great contribution together with producing countries to meet those sustainability demands in the future. So I would like to stop now, otherwise it is a keynote speech again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dietele, and your point in the direction of UNFCCC, very well taken. I'm certainly happy to take that back to Bonn and back to the process about the enormous importance of substituting fossil fuels and building materials which are unsustainable. You already alluded to the central importance of restoring land, and the UN Convention to combat desertification is not only about desertification, it's really about land degradation and in positive return about land restoration. Dr. Monga, sitting to my right, is the Deputy Executive Secretary. Pradeep, please, you have the floor for your remarks.
Thank you, Martin. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to represent UNCCD, United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, at this very important global Bamboo and Rattan Congress. I was reflecting while coming here that how do we work so closely within BAR and all participants present here who are talking about different things at different times, but all of us have same goal, how to make bamboo economic capital, social capital, and of course ecological capital. Briefly about UNCCD, I was just struck by Pablo's very inspiring talk earlier this morning, that bamboo was taken as a poor man's commodity and now it's shifted to highly technical industrialized product. Among all three Rio conventions which came out of 1992 Earth Summit, climate change, biodiversity, and land degradation or desertification, the third convention is very lesser known but has become very relevant for all developing countries, but also North countries when we talk about global issues of reaching out to sustainable development goals and of course climate action on the ground. As we speak, 2 billion hectares, almost 25% of Earth's land surface is degraded land. Please remember, the only finite in this world is land. Everything else gets recycled, reused. Of course, there are different dimensions of atmosphere and others, but land is only limited commodity we have. And we have degraded over the last few centuries almost 25% of this land area. As we speak, 500 million hectares of productive agricultural land has become non-productive in the last 1 century. As we speak, 23 hectares we are losing every minute, even this conference. We are losing to some land degraded activities around the world. And that's where this convention becomes very relevant. How to address land degradation, desertification, and drought. I was really very happy to note that yesterday in ministerial panel, everybody spoke about land restoration. And that's where the linkage comes between bamboo, land restoration, and climate action. And here, SDG 15, Sustainable Development Goal 15, introduces a concept what we call land degradation neutrality. Land degradation neutrality stands for neutralizing 12 million hectares of land which is getting degraded every year. How we can neutralize it? How can we either make it, reduce it to zero, or we have equally 12 million hectares of land becoming productive every year? And that's what the whole philosophy is behind land degradation neutrality, which we want to achieve by 2030. Can bamboo play a very important role in that? Yes. Answer is yes. If I remember, in BAR, and all countries in BAR committed to restoring 5 million hectares by 2020. We are talking at a fraction of what we are speaking, what Pablo has given in his presentation. Bamboo can really reach out, not only to help in all poverty reduction, hunger, water, environment, energy, and of course, what we call ecosystem restoration. And here the challenge comes, how we use bamboo for climate mitigation, adaptation. For instance, 1 hectare of bamboo plantation can really bind around 13 tons of carbon in the soil. As you know, the soil carbon, which is around 2,500 gigaton, is double of the carbon what we have in atmosphere as well as in forest, which comes to roughly around 1,300 gigatons of carbon. So for climate action, when we say that land sector alone accounts for 25 to 30% of emissions, land sector must also provide solution to climate change. And here we believe, after hearing all the experts here and even today morning talk, I was really inspired to say, yes, bamboo can be part of that equation where we can connect the dots to have SDGs in place, achieve SDGs by 2030, especially land degradation neutrality. And of course, can we also have climate action on the ground by bamboo becoming a very important biodiversity species to really have bind the carbon in soil as well as, of course, in the cover, forest cover. Two very good examples yesterday were mentioned, and I would like to mention here also what was Great Green Wall example, which is Africa Union initiative in 11 countries. And this is where we are trying to have a green cover. We call it Great Green Wall project, promoted, supported by UNFCCC, where we really try to achieve multiple benefits. And that's where bamboo becomes very important. And second was very good example of in orders Inner Mongolia in China itself, where private sector, public-private partnership has reverse desertification. Bamboo is one of the crops, but of course the other indigenous crops being used to really look at those arresting the desertification area. While closing, I would like to say that such conference here gives us very good hope, especially for our convention, whether in-BARC countries can use bamboo as one of the solutions to combat both climate change, but also achieve SDGs, especially through land degradation neutrality. And here one good news is we have launched Land Degradation Neutrality Fund. Because when we talk about action on the ground, we need capacity, we need funds, and of course we need policy framework. And once these things are in place, I'm quite confident that bamboo will continue to play even increasingly important role in overall scenario of SDG and climate action on the ground. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much also for highlighting the importance of soil organic carbon in the fight with climate change. And I'm happy to say that at the last microphone on? Okay. I was just thanking Dr. Lugt for highlighting the importance of soil organic carbon because it's such a massive element of fighting climate change. And in the last conference of the parties of the climate process, COP23 in Bonn, we finally reached a breakthrough on land use and agriculture. So I'm happy to take the issue of carbon of bamboo and soil organic carbon into this discussion in the framework of the COP. You also mentioned the Land Degradation Neutrality Fund and the central question of making money available for large-scale land restoration and which bamboo can play a role. And I would like to ask our next panelist, Mr. Jovrine, about the potential. China is about to introduce a large-scale carbon trading system. Do you see a potential for carbon sequestration by bamboo? What would be a policy that would be useful for that? Please.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. And good morning, Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen. It's my great honor to be here during this very important panel discussion on this very important topic. Yes, to respond to the question raised by Martin, I think that actually China has launched a national-wide emission trading scheme in December 2017. And the initial stage, the emission trading scheme in China is focused on the energy power generation sector. And within the policy continues later on, and approximately 8 sectors including the power generation sector, will be covered by this emission trading scheme in China. Yes, the answer to the question raised by Martin is positive. The first can be a part of the emission trading scheme, but not now, now. And since our policy just now is focusing more on the key emitter, that's the power generation sector in China. And forestry is, as you know, based on by the previous keynote speaker, is mainly sequester carbon. Of course, forest can also play an important role in conserving carbon and substitute carbon. Yeah. In China, bamboo is a part of the forestry resources. So obviously, in the future, the bamboo will be given opportunity to join the emission trade scheme. Emission trade scheme, I mean the products marketed in this scheme include two parts. First is allowance market trading. It's based on the cap set by the government policy. The second is credit trade. Based on my knowledge, in the cooperation with INBA, Chinese government, the relevant institutions, has developed the methodology for calculating the bamboo plantation, the carbon accumulated through the planting of bamboo. This credit can be traded on the existing emission trading scheme in China, but not allowance, because just now the policy just focusing on the key emitting sector, such as power generation. But the policy is sure in the future, forestry, including the bamboo, could be a part of the national emission trading scheme. And also, I think the Chinese emission trading policy can be further replicated to the other country, because China is a developing country. So that's my response to your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And speaking about forests and bamboo, there's always the distinction. And speaking to our next panelist, Mr. Dasgupta, we spoke about an announcement of His Excellency, the Prime Minister of India, that bamboos are not considered trees. Why is that so important? Please, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you. And a very warm good morning to all of you. It's my honor to represent my country among the select group of panelists out here. I'd like to start with a few statistics. The total forest and tree cover of the country of India is around 80 million hectares, which is 24.39% of its geographical area. Now, you must look at it from the context of India's land mass, which is 2.4% of the world, sustaining 17% of the world's population, and around 18% of the world's cattle population. Despite this enormous pressure, we've been able to maintain a forest and tree cover of around 25%. And the other thing is that the forest cover of the country is on an increasing trend. That's a positive sign. The total bamboo in our forest is around 15.69 million hectares, which is pretty substantial. Now, your question is what the policy changes which has just recently taken place by the Honorable Prime Minister of India, wherein bamboo which is growing outside the forest, recorded forest areas, that is bamboo growing on farmlands, on agricultural areas, in homesteads, etc., are now no longer considered as a tree. So there has been an amendment in the Indian Forest Act by which it has been declared that all bamboo which is growing outside the forest areas are no longer considered a tree, meaning thereby that it would not require any felling permission, any transit permission, which were considered to be the bottlenecks for growth of this sector. Now that's a very significant decision by the Government of India in the context of not only increasing the area under green cover, because bamboo would definitely lead to a boost in the growth of more plantations. People would come forward now because, as we have heard since yesterday, and many speakers have been speaking of bamboo as a miracle plant. 4 years you can harvest it, and you can harvest it on a cyclic basis without deforesting. And we also know that bamboo sequesters carbon dioxide at a much faster rate compared to other plants. So it is all the more important, this policy, in this context, that now bamboo would be welcomed. It's already been welcomed. We've not only seen the Government of India doing this change in the enactment of in the Indian Forest Act, but also the different states, the provinces, they have also followed by amending their state act. So it's a very, very positive sign. I would also like to mention here that the total carbon stock in India's forests is around 7 billion tons, 7082 million tons of carbon. And our Honorable Prime Minister has given a target in the Paris COP that the NDC targets of an additional 2.5 to 3 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Now, how do we achieve it? It's a question, especially looking at India's population, the land being small, all these sort of things. It's a major challenge. The way in which our forest cover is increasing, and we have calculated, we are increasing or adding 35 million tons of carbon every year. So at this rate, if you go, we would be reaching around 1.9 billion tons of CO2 equivalent, if you convert it into CO2 equivalent. But still, there'll be a shortfall of about 0.6 to 1.1 billion tons. So obviously, there are two-pronged strategies. One would be for a massive afforestation program, which would include bamboo, obviously. Now, with the change in with the amendment in the Indian Forest Act, we expect that the growth of bamboo would be much, much more. People would take it up. The other, of course, would be the catchment area treatment of major rivers of the country. And the catchment actually is the forest. And as Mr. Pradeep ji was saying, the most carbon is found mostly in the soil. And we've also calculated that in Indian's forest, 56% of carbon is in the soil. So we should be able to treat the soil in a proper manner to store carbon. So that's one of the other strategies of the ministry now, is to take up the catchment treatment of all the major rivers, that is mainly in the forest areas, so that you can stop the runoff, you can sort of have a better soil, which will also help in reducing forest fires, because these forest floor would be moist for a larger portion of the year. And it will also reduce man-animal conflict. There are lots of things if you actually take up these measures. And the other thing obviously would be to go for a greening program. And I am confident that with the greening program, bamboo would now play a very, very major role, and it be used. It be planted by most of the farmers and entrepreneurs who would like to invest and get returns directly.
Thank you very much. I think a wonderful example how a targeted adjustment of policy can really trigger massive development on the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, before I give the floor to our last panelist, please be reminded that you will have the possibility to ask questions. You can already think now about your questions. Give me a show of hands so I can give you the floor after the next intervention. My colleague from UN Environment, Meng Han, has been working on ecosystem services and ecosystem-based solutions for climate and development. And I'm sure you will be delighted about the discussion and the many aspects that we heard, positive aspects of promoting bamboo. From your perspective, bamboo and rattan, how can it add to the puzzle of development and climate?
Thanks, Martin. I think from yesterday to today, to me, I believe that all of you, same with me, have learned how important bamboo is and how many different ways we can use bamboo to support livelihoods. So I would quite like to provide a little bit of science, I think, behind this from a natural capital and a biodiversity perspective. And also the key, some of the key messages I've learned yesterday from the great pleasure to join a parallel session on biodiversity conservation, and with the speakers presenting very species-specific conservation in Ethiopia, Uganda, Madagascar, and Nepal. So that's really, really interesting. And I would like to start with biodiversity, which is quite often, it's a very important term and very important topic, but quite often in the discussion of natural capital, it's a bit difficult for us to measure how important it is. I would like to say that biodiversity actually sits in the heart of natural capital, and when we think about ecosystem services that flow out from the natural capital. And in this context, bamboo itself it has many different species. So there is biodiversity in bamboo just by itself. But in the meantime, it also provides as major food source and also habitat for various endangered species. So that's where, to me, where bamboo sits within this large picture. One point I would like to raise is when we talk about, quite often when we talk about species conservation, I don't think we should consider it as a standalone activity. And quite often it needs to be linked with other sectors in the society and the development side of the things. So this comes to the understanding of exactly how natural capital, with the support of biodiversity, because biodiversity provides the core support to the function of key ecosystems, which then enables the flows of services which serve the people's livelihoods. So I think to understand such links is really important in the understanding of how natural capital can play a role in a changing climate to support livelihoods, but also biodiversity conservation, and where bamboo sits as one type of natural capital in this. With the climate changing, it's also one direct impact is biodiversity distribution and also the availability of the various ecosystem services that we rely on. So I think we really need to understand these different factors and how the interaction pattern changes under a changing climate. And that forms, I think that understanding really underpins our understanding of how bamboo can contribute to solve some of the major challenges we're facing globally. Another point I would like to raise is I don't think bamboo can be a panacea that solves all the problems. So we really need to consider bamboo as one of the solutions and how we can integrate bamboo into some of the major instruments to solve these problems. So one of the things we could do, I would propose to do, is why don't we have a better understanding of the benefits and the risks analysis related to the use of bamboo in the various major topics, including climate change. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, you have now the possibility to ask questions or add your statement to what have been said. It's a bit hard to see you, but there is a gentleman here in the second row. I don't know whether we have a roaming microphone, but I give the number 4 So I'm now on microphone number 3. So I have a show of hands on the left-hand side, on the second row. There are 2 people here. And please, when you ask your question, if you could briefly identify yourself.
Good morning. My name is John Hardy. I built a bamboo school in Bali called the Green School. I'll be talking about that tomorrow. But today I'm on a personal quest. I'm 68 years old and I've burned a lot of carbon. I've been traveling since I was 18 and I've made a personal commitment to zero out my carbon using bamboo. I have 17,000 seedlings ready to plant in the mountains of Bali, but so far I haven't found anyone who could tell me, with my carbon footprint, how many seedlings do I need to plant. I've asked very smart people and gotten nowhere. I'm ready to go. Help me.
Thank you very much. Can I collect all questions? Same row, 5 or 6 to the right, please.
我是来自湖南双牌南方重点林业县，我是开头那个墨索公司糖的那个主产品竹建材那个生产家。我这几年一直在听这个一个问题呢，大家都讨论这个竹材怎么好。的重点问题在哪里？我是从14岁从事竹产业生产，目前毛竹价格从14年的800块钱一吨一直在降，啊，为什么会这个毛竹降呢？因为这个产品价格也一直在降，所以讲呢，这个毛竹一降，老百姓就不愿意种毛竹了，把这个毛竹整商都给它灭掉，这是一个问题存在的。我们中国为什么不带头来用这个竹材，比方森林公园啊、机场啊、高铁站，刚才也讲了，你当时一直当这个竹材一用上去，量一大上去，价格自然就上升。那老百姓，我们收购了毛竹，价格一上升，老百姓就愿意去种竹子了。所以讲呢，我已经研发了这个7、8年这个竹材，现在我们中国几乎没人用，都在欧洲在用。我现在生产都是出口的欧洲在用。中国一直在用，我就一直在想，为什么中国不带头用？中国的竹材这么多，是吧？所以讲，我建议这个议题呢，就是讲呢，如果中国这么大的工程，政府的工程呢是在用竹材去代替木材，那价格肯定上升。价格一上升的话，老百姓肯定会种毛竹，那就符合我们这几年我一直在听这个要求就达到了。我是提议这个事，谢谢。
Thank you very much. I see a question all the way in the back. And before that, there's a lady in the middle. You have the floor, please, and then the gentleman in the back. Please. And if you can identify yourself.
I am Dulce Blanca Punzalan from the Philippines, also from the World Bamboo Organization, ISO Technical Committee for Bamboo and Rattan and Climate Reality. In terms of environmental profitability, would your respective countries have tax incentives for small, medium, micro enterprises who will innovate or present climate-smart technologies, and these technologies will be able to help the most climate-vulnerable communities in those countries? Second question, what will the process be so that these climate-vulnerable communities will have easier and faster access to the People's Survival Fund or the Green Climate Fund?
Thank you very much. And I would take a last question from the gentleman all the way in the back.
So thank you for the opportunity. I'm Amrish Kumar from India. and we are working particularly restoration of the land. Of course, as one of the gentlemen from panel rightly told, 23 hectare land every minute we are losing by degradation. And this loss we can recover only by the vegetation method, and that should be fast-growing species. Bamboo is well suited. But land is degrading both way, physically and chemically. So physically, of course, across the world we have data, but as far chemically means solidity and salinity is concerned, we should focus much on those aspects also to make bamboo well suited and fitted the land where chemically degradation is faster. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would give the floor now to our panelists, and I hope that I have a chance for a second round of questions, mindful of the time. If I got you correctly, and there were some audio issues, the question was around opportunities for stakeholders, about possibilities to access finance, in particular from the Green Climate Fund, and also questions about land degradation and land restoration in India. And maybe I start with the last point and would ask Pradeep maybe to pick up this one and look at my panelists who wants to speak to the question as well. But Pradeep, you first.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you for questions. Targeted financing becomes very relevant when we talk about risk mitigation and new technologies, processes, and that is also true for bamboo industries. Land Degradation Neutrality Fund is an addition to already global funds like GEF, Global Environment Fund, as well as Green Climate Fund. But LDN Fund is specifically targeted to land restoration with multiple benefits: food, water, energy, ecosystem. And I do believe, after listening to so many experts and eminent policymakers, it's very clear that bamboo plantations linking to value chain approach with industrial side will qualify for LDN fund, especially which is meant for private sector, for scaling up both for SDGs as well as for climate mitigation through land restoration. Question about land restoration of land from the chemicals and otherwise, please remember that land degradation is occurring because of various reasons. First reason is intensive agriculture itself can lead to land degraded land. But then land being diverted for urban areas, infrastructure, mining, minerals, and of course chemicals. And chemicals treatment becomes the most expensive, and again that takes a series of steps required depending on the local conditions. So that's where we try to work on those land restoration issues first, where we can bring in multiple benefits for communities, where land tenure system, gender issues and others becomes equally important. So here I will urge you to look at some of our best practices model being implemented around the world. And I'm sure I have a colleague from India who can really further dwell on that. But we believe that land restoration through different practices and with targeted financing is the key towards achieving SDG 15, as well as other SDGs, and of course, climate action on the ground.
Thank you very much. And I believe Mr. Chun Feng also wants to answer one question. Please, sir.
So thank you. The question raised by the audience. I would like to respond to the question raised by the first question. That is, if my understanding is correct, your question raised is about how many bamboo seedlings will be planted for reduce your carbon footprint in Bali. And this is a mathematical issue. It's very easy. And you can calculate how much carbon emitted through the traveling annually. And also we can calculate what kind of species of bamboo can be planted with what kind of planting density. And we can calculate how many seedlings you can plant it. I can give you a figure in China. In central China, annually, the carbon sequestered through the bamboo plantation can be arrived at 5 tons per hectare each year. So that's a figure. So that, because time is limited, I don't want to tell the detail how to calculate that. And my response to the second question raised by the Philippines about maybe if my understanding correct, how to make the small farmer or the community access easily to the some finance resources. That's, there is several finance mechanism or the funds available for supporting the community to take the action addressing climate change. But how to make the small farmer or the community can easily access, that depends on the decision to be made by the COP. And frankly speaking, the current applications procedures for this financial process funds, it's hard for smallholder, small farmland owner to access this fund. So I can suggest the INBA can use its state being the permanent observer to UNFCCC to call upon the parties to streamline the process of applying for the fund by the small community or the farmers. So that could be a good way to change the current process to make the small farmer can easily use the international finance source to support their action to address climate change. And the question raised by the person from China, I think that, there's in the market, there is both the bamboo is available and also the timber is also available. Within recent years, even globally, there is a campaign to protect the forest resources, especially the tropical forest resources. But the soft world coming from New Zealand and from Canada is also increasing. I mean, the supply is increasing. So if the price will be decided by the market mechanism. If we will increase the price of the supply of the bamboo, maybe the producer of the processor industry would like to use more timber. So that is a competition, market competition. So that is not easy. But obviously, to increase the utilization of bamboo in our national timber production sector, it's a good way. But to great extent, this will be decided by the market mechanism. That's my answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chun Feng, and I think Dr. Dieterle wanted to contribute as well.
Yeah, thank you for the interesting questions. We talk about access of finance and how we can promote community action in tropical countries to produce more bamboo and generate the benefits we have heard about. I would answer it in a slightly different way. I think we need 3 elements to make successful bamboo and rattan economy. The first is the institutional legal policy environment. I think the governments have a responsibility to position renewable material like bamboo, but also timber and other natural material in a way that it is competitive to non-renewable materials. So that is a question of legislation. It is a question of incentive mechanism, fiscal incentive, taxation incentives, subsidies, and I think that aspect needs to be looked at in much more detail. I noticed that the World Bank has not done work in that context, what taxation and fiscal systems could do in terms of promoting environmental benefits. They work on energy and other issues, but not on environmental benefits in that sense. The second element is capacity building. As the Minister and others yesterday mentioned, local populations often have not the knowledge and the capacity to think of innovation and to make use of the unheard possibilities of bamboo and in their, for housing, for livelihoods, for environmental protection, resilience, and so on. I think that's very important that organizations help these communities, but also create community associations, bring them together so that they can establish economies of scale instead of having individual smallholder action which doesn't have market access and transition to bigger markets. And the third element is access to finance. And you have spoken about it. And I think if the first two parts are in place, access to finance is much easier, because these communities and these smallholders have the capacity to make the case and to argue for more financing. And I think that in that sense I would like to answer that question which came here. On the question of how many bamboo seedlings you have to produce, I think it depends for how you use the seedlings. If you just let them grow, you have the benefit of carbon sequestration in the forest or in the ground and in the roots. But if you use the bamboo in a way you use it in with housing and so on, you can gain additional benefits from substitution and storage and so on, which might be much bigger than what you have in the forest or on the land. So I just encourage you to build as many bamboo houses as possible, and you make your goal much easier and much faster. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, that was a very rich discussion, and I'm a little bit shell-shocked about how to wrap up this rich discussion. Let me try. What I have learned today is bamboo and rattans, it's right in the middle of many things that keep the international organizations and the international community busy. And it provides so many aspects of the solution that the solution itself has to look into all of the different facets. We have learned how resilience is actually being built by producing bamboo and rattan. We have learned about the benefit which is still hidden, that bamboo and rattan can replace unsustainable materials. So the carbon sequestration benefit is not just in the plant itself, but also what you have avoided. We have heard about soil organic carbon and the enormous importance about restoring land and bringing bamboo particularly to areas where land has been lost before, as a means also to stabilize land, to prevent landslides, to work on disaster risk reduction, but of course also as a fantastic opportunity for carbon sink. We have seen how government interventions in India and China can really produce opportunity, adjustments that enable farmers to produce their own bamboo and become part of the solution. The perspective of participating in a carbon market and having additional finance. We have heard from the audience the importance of access to finance, and I will happily take that back to the discussions that we have in the UN Framework Convention. But of course, bamboo, as we heard from you, is just one part of ecosystem-based solutions. And we wouldn't be here as a human species if it wouldn't be for the nature environment that has been supporting us so kindly over thousands of years. So in a way, we are learning from our past, but we are turning our knowledge into the future. Which brings me really to the central importance of national climate plans, which we call under the Paris Agreement the nationally determined contributions. Because they are more than just climate plans. They will really determine in so many countries how we want to live together in the year 2030. And in a way, almost like in political theory, it becomes a social contract for our future. So let me conclude by saying that what we have learned, I think, from this panel and from this morning is that if you go for national climate plans, they need to be done in the way that was formulated for the Sustainable Development Goals, by leaving no one behind, because ultimately a solution only works for all of society if it really works for everybody in the society. And in this aspect, I think bamboo and rattan is really a fantastic point of departure because it enables the world's poorest, it works with the most vulnerable, and it can close the circle between fighting poverty and fighting climate change. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a round of applause to our wonderful panelists and also to our speakers of the first half of this morning. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of today's plenary session. There will be a tea break from 10:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. Thematic sessions will be held on the 3rd and 4th floor starting from 11 a.m. You're welcome to attend any sessions using the same simultaneous translation receiver. Please return the receiver to the registration area after it has been used. Thank you for your cooperation. We would like to let you know that the closing ceremony tomorrow has been moved to Function Hall A. Thank you. We hope you enjoy today's thematic sessions. 尊敬的各位来宾，今天的全体大会到此结束。10点半到11点是茶歇时间，主题会议将在11点开始。您可以自由到3楼、4楼会议室参加您感兴趣的主题会议。